Hello and welcome to the Three Questions Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Now, if you are someone close to you as a globally mobile founder, an investor, or an executive navigating immigration options between the United States and Canada or beyond, especially with shifting political climates that we're experiencing these days and with policy changes, stay tuned. This episode is definitely for you. The topic today is the three questions globally mobile high net worth families should ask about immigration in 2026. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions Podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. Joining me on the Three Questions Podcast is Marc-Andre Seguin. He's the co-founder of XCO Attorneys, a Montreal-based firm that specializes in corporate immigration and multi-jurisdictional planning for high net worth individuals, founders, and executives. Marc-Andre brings deep expertise in helping clients navigate complex pathways like E2, EB5, and other visa strategies across the United States and Canada. Now, Marc-Andre recently joined me on the panel at the Canada-Florida Chamber of Commerce event in Fort Lauderdale, where his insights were extremely well received. Today, we're exploring the three questions globally mobile high net worth families should ask about immigration in 2026. And he's joining us today from Mexico City. Marc-Andre, it's great to see you again. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you for having me, Wayne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it was great. And we had a great time on the panel there when back in Fort Lauderdale back in March. You were a great guest. We had a great time. We had a lot of questions. It was one of those events where I think we started with one question for each one of the panelists, and then the floor opened up and we basically had to shut things down because we were running out of time and there were still lots of questions. That's always a great sign. Really appreciated your insights and look forward to having you. We're going to do more of those for sure. We're going to figure that out for sure. I know
Absolutely.
there are plans already in place. As I say, more shall be revealed. So, Marc-Andre, before we get to our three questions, let's start with a question that actually came up during the panel discussion. Given the current political climate and the enforcement climate in the United States and Canada, what immigration strategies are actually holding up in practice, not just on paper, but in actual practice? How would you respond to that question?
That's a great question, Wayne. And to be honest, it's a fair one as well. A lot of people are asking themselves exactly that. The first thing I tell my clients is that the climate has certainly changed, but many of the rules and the programs have not. So the strategies that are actually holding up in practice are the ones built on substance, not structure. So serious filings are still successful. What's struggling are the thin filings, the ones that were optimized for approval odds rather than genuine eligibility. So serious people get treated seriously. People in organizations who try to get cute are in for a bigger challenge. So what's really changed is the tolerance for cutting corners and operating in gray zones. So obviously our advice to our clients right now is that their risk tolerance for non-compliance should be zero. Not close to zero, zero. The enforcement environment means that things that might have been overlooked 2 or 3 years ago are now much more likely to create serious problems. So the posture really has to be impeccable. The other thing that I'd say, by the way, is that, and because this surprises people, is that even in the current climate, the US is genuinely more open to entrepreneurial and high achieving profiles than Canada is right now. Yeah, no, Canada has considerably shut its doors to economic immigration over the past couple of years, and the shift is real and significant. Let me give you an example. Imagine a world-class British actor, let's say, someone like Daniel Craig or, whoever, international profile that you can think of. And let's say that they want to immigrate to North America. Well, in the US, that person would almost certainly qualify under an extraordinary ability category, and could realistically have a green card within a few months, certainly under a year, even in this day and age. In Canada, on the other hand, that same person would essentially be limited to a very little known exceptional talent substream in the province of Quebec that literally just opened last week. And they'd be looking for years before they could even obtain permanent residency. And this doesn't matter whether it's an Oscar winner or a superstar or a Nobel Prize winner. it would be a very, very hard path and a long one in Canada for some of these profiles. So that's the gap we're dealing with. And the strategies that are holding up really are these pathways in the US that are investment based, merit based, and are applied with rigorous compliance and careful planning from the start.
Well, I'll get a little, I don't know if I told you this when we were together in Port Laudia, but that's exactly how I ended up getting my green card.
I'm
Exceptional,
not surprised.
exceptional ability, which I know for some people it may fall over laughing, but that's exactly what happened.
Oh, come on, when you are exceptional.
Thank you. Well, at least up here. So I got one more. I got actually another question. You just prompted me.
Sure.
Um, okay, I have a lot of friends, as you know. I know people in both countries. I have a lot of really good friends. Uh, one of the things, actually, I will reference a podcast that I did with another immigration attorney out of Washington, D.C. God Almighty, it was about what? A year ago, now that I think of it. And the thing that they brought up, and they were specifically referencing Canadians that were coming to the US on the pretense that they were going to be on vacation. And what turned out to be, the reality of it is that they were more quote unquote working vacations. They were coming down for maybe a few months at a time and with their laptops and so on. And they were basically setting up shop in wherever part of the country. And the immigration attorney on that podcast uh, had a cautionary warning about that if they were ever to take it into secondary screening, they could be in significant peril of being advised that they would be not welcome back into the country for a considerable period of time, something like 5 years. I just wanted to know if you had any comment on that, if you still think that's the case, or like what would your advice be to somebody who's thinking of coming down here and extending an extended period of time in the US while still being a resident of Canada?
I think that's a really good question. It's actually one that I'm faced with pretty much every week. Um, there are very strict limitations on what you can and can't do as a visitor in the United States. And without going into the details here, there's a fair amount of case law that kind of helps identify and interpret those limitations. But the fact of the matter is, if you're coming in as a tourist or as a business visitor, there are things you can do, and there are a lot of things that you can't do. And if you're engaging in actual work in the United States, especially if it's work that will benefit the US market or a US business, or if you're compensated in the US, those are a lot of red flags that mean that you should definitely seek out legal counsel to make sure that you're not putting yourself in harm's way. Because at the end of the day, if you're found to be non-compliant, that could lead to serious consequences for you, for your company, and for many, many years in the future. And you certainly don't want that, especially when a lot of these things can be addressed by a simple list of do's and don'ts. Some cases, a letter that just specifies what it is that you're actually doing in the United States and what you're not going to be doing, and making sure that you're clear on the rules. So obviously compliance, as I said a few moments ago, the tolerance for compliance, for compliance risk absolutely has to be zero. It should always be zero in my opinion, but even more so in this day and age.
Okay, great context. I really appreciate that. So, okay, let's get to our three questions globally mobile high net worth families should ask about immigration in 2026. Okay, Mondre, let's get to the first question. How should globally mobile founders, investors, and executives think about multi-jurisdictional planning now rather than betting on everything on a single country?
So, Wayne, let me give you an analogy I often use with my clients about immigration planning, especially for a globally mobile family. Mobile planning is like building a house with more than one exit. You want to know where the exits are before you need them, not while the building is on fire.
Mhm.
So, what we mean by multi jurisdictional planning here is that you've thought through your legal status, your tax exposure, your business structures, and your family's option across at least a few jurisdictions, and you've looked at it from a portfolio standpoint and in a coordinated way. So for Canadian high net worth families specifically, the US is almost always in the picture because of trade ties, business relationships, real estate, just sometimes lifestyle. But relying exclusively on a single pathway to the US is sometimes a risk we're actively counseling against right now. And that's because of the legal environment and the shifting plates as far as that's concerned. So, what we recommend really is building a legal and immigration architecture that lets you pivot. So, what could that mean? Well, if you're an investor, that means maybe considering a structure for an E2 work permit if you have a specific business in mind, while also having an EB5 application process that could be unrelated to your business venture as a whole, but still can help you secure your pathway towards the green card, especially since the EB5 is possibly up for significant reforms starting in the fall of this year in 2026. It may also mean layering in European residency. So Portugal has a well-established investment residency framework right now. France has a passive income route that appeals to certain families with lifestyle priorities. Italy has a flat tax regime that has been drawing serious attention from globally mobile families, especially in Europe and from the UK, more specifically, who are managing significant wealth. So the goal is that no single policy change or processing delays are derailing you and your family from their ability to move, work, and access capital where you need to.
Would this be applicable for someone who is, I was just thinking about a client of mine right now, actually, as you were talking. So I have a client that's almost there. I mean, they are within what, I guess almost 2 months maybe of retiring. And they are fitting this category perfectly. So the fact that they are retired or retiring, would do these options that you mentioned of Portugal, Italy, and so on, maybe even Mexico, where you are today, are these in play for someone who is retiring, or they only work well for someone who is continuing working?
I mean, they're specifically designed, I think, to cater to that market segment. So if you're about to retire, Mexico has a very nice access to permanent residency, which by the way does not expire. Just by way of having some capital and access to income that is from outside of the country. Portugal has a golden visa program that is entirely passive and therefore opens up a pathway for residents in Europe without the need to actively manage a business. Italy is a little bit trickier in some cases, but again, if you're willing to spend a lot of time in the country, regardless, there's definitely a pathway for those retirees. So
So,
it's really up to the family's objectives and what they want to do.
so families that have significant assets say here in the United States and Canada, for example, you can develop a strategy that can help them protect them during the residency changes or any kind of policy shifts. That's what you do, is basically help put together plans for them.
Correct. I mean, think of it as a portfolio, right? So you don't want to put all your eggs in the same basket when you're investing. Well, it's the same thing with mobility, especially if you can afford it, especially if you're a high net worth family. You probably want to have some diversity and to have options, which is the true commodity in this day and age. So a commodity that allows you to have a maximum amount of mobility across jurisdictions for you and your family to achieve your goals, whatever they may be.
Our topic today is the three questions globally mobile high net worth families should ask about immigration in 2026. Joining us from Mexico City is Marc-André Seguin. He's the co-founder of EXO Attorneys, and they're a Montreal-based firm specializing in corporate immigration and multi-jurisdictional planning for high net worth individuals, founders, and executives. On to question number two, Marc-André. What are the biggest mistakes you are seeing sophisticated clients make right now when they're choosing between options like the E2 visa, the EB5, which is the former startup visa, or a wait and see strategy? What's the biggest mistakes you're seeing? I know I have one, but I'm going to bring that up after you share yours.
Absolutely. So the E2 is obviously a work permit for immigrant investors going to the US. The EB5 is the green card equivalent. So again, for immigrant investors, high net worth individuals. The biggest mistake, honestly, is the wait and see approach. And it's hard for me to criticize my clients or people in general on this because I do understand the instinct. Right, you want to have a clear understanding of the pathway ahead. But having been in this particular universe for long enough, you know, the environment feels uncertain, so people hold off. But what really happens is that time passes, circumstances keep changing, and suddenly the window has narrowed. So EB5 in particular is a program where timing matters enormously because there are backlogs for certain nationalities. There are processing timelines. The investment thresholds can change. The legal landscape for some of these programs, particularly the EB5, could be up for review as soon as next year, retroactively applicable to October 1st of this year. So obviously, waiting 18 months to decide means you're now 18 months behind and the landscape may have shifted again. And generally speaking, when the landscape shifts, in my experience, it's not to make things easier for people. We're in a world where borders are becoming a lot thicker. Programs are becoming more selective and slow. So that time lost can really have a meaningful impact on your family's planning. So that's a big one. The second big mistake is treating programs as interchangeable. The example here being the E2 and the EB5. So they're not interchangeable, even though they may appear similar on the surface. But E2 is a non immigrant visa, it's a work permit. It doesn't lead to the green card on its own. It requires, ongoing active involvement in a business. EB5, by contrast, is an immigrant investor route with a significant, different capital threshold, a different timeline. It's a different risk profile. But sophisticated clients sometimes think that because they have capital, either option works. But the reality is that your business plan, your time horizon, your family situation, all of that will determine which path actually fits. And choosing the wrong one, even with the right amount of money, can cost you years and may end up being unsuccessful.
Well, I will say, I told you I had my own mistake or my own suggested one. You kind of covered most of it. The wait and see. And what I think happens is that sometimes people are, and I will point the finger at the applicant and also the representation, is that the eagerness to get into the country seems to supersede the long-term view. In other words, you know, get me in, get me into the country. And if you are, and really this is an age issue. I will say there's an age factor that also needs to be considered here. No, maybe this makes sense if you're maybe in your mid to late 30s, maybe just recently married, maybe still single. The risks are not quite that, they're not immense to take that wait and see approach, although I agree with you 100%. The challenge becomes if you are, maybe in your early 50s, you're getting close to, and again, the factor is that you need to figure out your plan going forward. And there's that capital forecasting, the financial planning angle to this conversation as well. Because, one thing that a lot of Canadians don't realize is that, we just recently did a podcast on Medicare and Medicare Advantage, Medicare supplement plans, and so on. One of the most important things to have as an asset once you become a resident of the United States is access to Social Security and Medicare. Well, in order to have access to that in the most cost-efficient way, you need to have 40 work credits. And that takes at least 10 years, if not longer, depending on your situation. So the idea of not knowing how you are going to become a permanent resident, because that's what you talked about, E2. E2 is basically is a work visa that allows you to come into the country. There's no pathway to permanent residency directly. I can tell
That's
you
right.
I can tell you this from personal experience, Marc-Andre. This is not an opinion. I lived it myself personally. So I would say to anyone who's immigrating, who wants to immigrate to the United States and who plans to be here on a permanent basis, when they talk to their immigration attorney, I would want to have a very clear understanding, not only of how am I going to get into the country, but how am I going to become a permanent resident, assuming, again, that's the desired outcome. Because I think sometimes there's too much focus put on just getting in and not realizing that it's really a two-step process for most people. That's my experience anyway. You're the attorney, not me, but that's my take on that. Is that
Absolutely, and it's a multi-layered one too.
yeah.
And to your point about age, Getting permanent residency in some cases is not just an individual project; it can also be a legacy for next generations to come. So that has
Same
to
here.
fit into the whole picture as well.
Yeah, that was one
But
of my goals. Yeah, I wanted to get my kids U.S.
absolutely.
citizenship, but I'll tell you, I made it right under the wire, in my opinion. I literally from that context. So and so the wait and see approach, faith, all of that, it's you got to be careful. That's
I'm
all I can say.
Exactly. It's not a matter of, I'm not chastising those who prefer to wait. It's perfectly understandable. In some cases, we're talking about a big project, a life-changing project. So you want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. The main issue is you don't want to be stuck in analysis paralysis either, because that can end up costing way more, or in some cases, just locking you out of the option that you were contemplating in the first place.
I guess the point I will make on this is is that those who fail to plan to fail. So if I came to you in all seriousness, and you obviously know more about immigration. You could spin people around in circles so fast you could set them on fire with what you know. I'm very knowledgeable. I came to you. I want to ask, okay, Marc Andre, I know you can get me into the country. Good business plan, a couple $100,000, and away we go. But how are we going to get me into becoming a permanent resident? That's the key part of the question. I think sometimes it gets overlooked. So to me, that just as a follow-up question, I think you agree with me. I don't know if you endorse this or talk about it very much with your clients, but from your perspective, how do you think that early wealth management input can help avoid these pitfalls when committing to a strategy? Do you conclude with my take that doing it as a team approach with an immigration attorney, a tax, and a wealth manager is probably the wisest way to go if you're dealing with someone who's accumulated some wealth?
Absolutely, Wayne. I mean, it changes the whole calculus, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But at the end of the day, when a wealth manager, tax advisor, when they're involved early, we're able to have a conversation as a group with the client about which assets, for instance, are going to be used for the investment, how that investment is going to be structured, what are the downstream tax and estate implications. It requires a lot of planning, and we each have our own area of specialty, and we need to talk to one another to get a full picture and a better understanding, because that will inform the strategy that ultimately we're all going to take as a team.
So on the yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, let me give you an example. I mean, obviously, closer to what I do, but for the EB-5 program, the source of funds documentation is one of the most scrutinized parts of the file. So, if you come to us with capital that's already been properly documented, traced over time, the filing is going to be cleaner and faster. If we've discussed a clear timeline on what the next steps are expected to be, with the other advisors, we'll also be able to execute on that strategy. And in some cases, work to have a transition plan for the mobility of the family, or delay certain steps to give more time to the other advisors to complete their work. But at the end of the day, if someone on that team comes in after the fact, we may find ourselves in a position of explaining a complex situation and try to fix something that had not been contemplated initially by the client or by the other advisors. So really, the early coordination means that the investment structure of the client, the immigration strategy, the wealth plan, all of that is aligned from the start rather than patched together after somebody's already committed.
So on the panel, I'm sure you remember this. This is back in Fort
Yeah, yeah,
Lauderdale. So the conversation, and it turned into a bit of a back and forth here, but I'm standing my ground on this one. So I made the comment that I felt that in the hierarchy of planning, that the immigration attorney, remember this? I don't know if
yep,
you could see I was doing this on the visual. I said, in the hierarchy of planning, I believe that the first person a person should talk to, and I'm going to talk about a Canadian looking to move to the United States here in this exam, the first person they really should talk to and consult with is an immigration attorney. Because I believe we have to know what the plan is before we can do planning. Now, my friend, uh, was saying, well, I think it should be the tax advisor who should be spoken to first. So there was a bit of back and forth on the hierarchy, but I'm going to stick to my belief that, I want to know how long is this going to take, realistically speaking. Because once we have an idea of how long this is going to take, because depending on the strategy that you're going to recommend, will really crack the door open as to how the financial aspect of this is all going to unfold. To me, that would be my take. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'll defer to you as to what your thoughts on that. But I believe that if I'm going to go through a process like this, I want to talk to an immigration attorney first, and then that'll open the door up to the financial aspects after the fact.
You
It's
do,
obviously a
but
team effort. There's a team effort here. Don't get me
absolutely,
wrong. It's a collective.
absolutely. But I will say a good immigration attorney on that very first call will say, "Are you being counseled on tax?"
Right.
And if you're not, get someone to advise you right away
100%.
because
I
I
agree.
need to talk to that person. So, whoever you talk to first is less relevant to how quickly you get everybody on board. And how early on you start that process with having everyone's perspective to plan adequately for that life changing project.
Fair enough. So either. I've always said immigration, and well, good to know that there's some flexibility there. Okay, Marc Andre, let's get to our third question. Here we go. When a client's preferred pathway gets disrupted mid-process, for example, a visa category gets suspended, processing time spike, or a policy reversal changes the calculus, what does the triage look like, and how do you rebuild the strategy without losing momentum, or is it even possible?
Well, I think it's a hard one, but the best answer I could give is that triage really starts with a clear-eyed audit and examination of where the client actually stands. So, what status do they currently hold? How long does that status remain valid? What is pending? What are the hard deadlines of the family? I mean, that sounds simple, but in practice, clients often don't even have a clean picture of their own immigration timeline, especially when they've been working with multiple advisors or across multiple jurisdictions, and those advisors haven't coordinated properly. Again, to your point just a few minutes ago. But the important thing is that once you have that map, you look at which pathways are still open. And the goal is then to always try to preserve status continuity. So if a gap in lawful status can create bars to reentry or adjustment, that could be very, very hard to fix later on. So what you try to do is make sure that there are no gaps. You make sure that there's a clear plan ahead and that you've structured your clients' assets or plans in such a way where you might have a fallback position or at least a bridging status either in the same jurisdiction, let's say the US, or in another one like in Europe. So the triage really is about identifying the shortest path to stability first, and then kind of rebuilding the longer term strategy from there. Whenever that happens.
So, are there any sort of contingency tools that have been proven more effective than others when you're dealing with high net worth families? Is there any
Well,
kind of fallback that you kind of think of?
well, I mean, at the risk of repeating myself, but I can't stress this enough. I think the most effective tool is really the one we build at the beginning, right? So we maintain flexibility in more than one jurisdiction if that's what the family needs. We maintain flexibility with the programs if that's what the family requires as well, for a variety of reasons. For Canadian permanent residents specifically, so who are thinking of making a move to another jurisdiction like the US, maintaining that status while pursuing U.S. immigration provides one of those safety nets. If the U.S. pathway stalls. But for most Canadian citizens listening in, that's not really the framing. The more interesting conversations about what else is in the portfolio. So we work with clients across Mexico and Europe, and those jurisdictions have genuinely useful bridging options. Portugal, for instance, has one of those attractive residency by investment frameworks in Europe right now. I brought up France earlier. France has a compelling passive income residency route as well that can tend to appeal to certain high net worth families with lifestyle priorities. None of those are consolation prizes, by the way. I mean, these are legitimate components of a well-structured mobility plan that could be implemented for a family strategy, and in some cases for different members of the same family, depending on what those members need. So we can expand the portfolio and kind of tailor it to individual members of the family to make sure that we have that diversity across the family, depending on what are the assets, what are the plans of those family members. But at the end of the day, we're going to look at for instance, whether a European anchor makes sense for a specific family member, or whether in some cases a Mexican structure will serve a North American client better because of their business interests. But the clients, at the end of the day, the clients who navigate those disruptions best are the ones who came up with a layered structure rather than a single application they're waiting on and they're betting on. So optionality, as I mentioned early on, optionality at the end of the day is probably the most valuable commodity that you can build into an immigration plan these days.
So as we wrap up the podcast here, and you've been a great guest, I'm already thinking about having you back on. This is fantastic. What advice would you give a globally mobile high net worth family that's feeling overwhelmed by the legal and business pathways, not always aligning? That just doesn't seem to be fitting. So what level of ease and comfort can you provide?
Well, I think a lot of the overwhelm that feeling of being overwhelmed comes from the feeling that everything has to be decided right now, all at once. It doesn't necessarily. So I think you want to start by separating the decision from the deadline. What you want first is a clear picture of your current status, your time horizon, of your priorities as a family. So, for example, are you optimizing? Are you getting this new status for business access? Are you doing this because you want education options for your children? Is it really an estate planning move? And once those priorities are ranked, the pathway decision becomes a lot more logical because certain programs will cater a lot better to some of these objectives. And that's really where the right advisors in the room come in, come in at the same time. And that's why, people like you, Wayne, and your team, or us, or tax advisors, connecting all of these people at the same time so that we can rank those priorities and act adequately to frame, okay, what are the options, the best options for our clients right now? What is the horizon on some of these programs? Are we expecting turbulence in some of these programs? So what should we act on first? And do we need a bridging program? Some people will love to collect status across the world, but that might not be the objective for the vast majority of families. So we try to make sure that we're not just trying to get them into a specific jurisdiction. We try to understand why that's where they want to go and whether it's actually necessary to achieve their goals. So that's really when immigration, tax, wealth management are coordinating together from the start. That's really where the recommendations align because everything's built on the same foundation.
The sense you're giving me, just listening to you, Marc-Andre, is that you're kind of trying to think around corners too here. So there's always going to be some contingency plans in place that we're not just relying on one option, that you're kind of thinking around the corners and there's a backup plan if plan A doesn't work.
Well, certainly, and even more so for families or organizations for who that optionality is at the core of what they want. Obviously, if the plan is to go to the US, well, I'm not going to try to, I'm not going to start analyzing how Portugal fits into that.
I'm just going to say, took the words out of my mouth there.
But I will try to look at, okay, so here's your core option, your best bet. But that best bet might take a bit of time for you to get there, and it might not fit your organization's goals right now. So what can we do as a bridging option for the time being, and how can we structure that activity for your organization or your family to make sure that everybody who needs to be there, is compliant, and is there on time? And if they can't be, what's the fallback position for us and for the organization so that we can avoid the turbulence to the extent that we can.
And let's be real here. There are going to be instances where you're talking to families where you're going to have to tell them, this isn't a good idea. There are going to be cases where, you know what? It sounds like a great idea. Moving to the US, it all looks great, but it just, given all of your circumstances, it may not be the best strategy. That does happen. It's just like in my line of work sometimes, a client's stated objectives just are not achievable. And, you have to be, that's a part of being compassionate and dispassionate, right? Sometimes you just have to bear the facts.
Absolutely. And in some cases, as long as, in some cases, the right decision might be to walk away from the opportunity or from a given plan. But you want to understand why you're doing it, and if there's a fallback to achieve your goals, through a different route. And
Understood.
that's really important.
So, for the folks that are listening in here who want to integrate immigration planning with comprehensive wealth management or capital forecasting, which is something we specialize here at One Capital Management, what would you recommend as the best first step they should take if they want to do sort of interactive collaboration?
I think you want to have the conversation with advisors before you think you need to. So the earlier the better. Bring people in and work from a perspective where this is something you're anticipating, because a lot of families will come to us with something that has already triggered some form of urgency, whether it's a business deal, an enforcement concern, a family event. But really, those who are best positions are the ones who had that conversation 12 to 18 months before they needed to act, and sometimes even earlier.
Time
So
is your
really,
friend.
time is your friend. The best first step is really for people to reach out to you, Wayne, and to us and to tax advisors, and have that comprehensive conversation, and then bring us in uh, as part of the same planning process. We're very used to working in that kind of coordinated structure at Exio, and we feel more comfortable working with other advisors as well, because we're very aware of the niche that we occupy, which is strictly business immigration law across multiple jurisdictions. But at the end of the day, it is only business immigration law that we do. So we don't do tax, we don't do incorporations, we don't do wealth planning, we don't do business plans, but we work with serious professionals who are good at doing that, and we work as a team. And I think the earlier that you build your team around that brain trust around your project, the better off you will be as a family or as an organization.
Well, I'll say this, but for those who are watching, so we're recording this so they can be, on video. And for those folks who are watching today, they can see all of your contact information below you on the screen. But we have a lot of people that are listening on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Maybe they're just driving around in their car. Maybe they're out for a walk. And for those folks, if they want to get a hold of you, Marc-Andre, what is the best way for them to contact you? How do they get a hold of you?
So they can reach out to us via our website, so exeo.ca. They can write to us at info@exeo.ca, or they can just write to me personally. So Mark, MARC, at exeo.ca. And we'll be happy to reach out to them. We'll be happy to have a call. Don't be afraid. Some people hesitate before reaching out to a lawyer. We're not here to bite. We're not here to charge you from the very first second either. We're really, in some cases, the best calls I have are calls where the client has decided not to go forward with anything. I'm not trying to sell you anything. We're really trying to just make sure that you understand where you stand and that you know what comes next, and at least you have a plan.
So we also have your phone number down. Is it okay for them to reach you by phone?
Absolutely. 514-657-2325.
Perfect. All right. Well, listen. Okay, Marc-Andre, you have been a fantastic five-star guest on the Three Questions podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed having you, truthfully, and look forward to having you back on the podcast again. Thank you very much. Marc-Andre Seguin joined us from Mexico City, and he's the co-founder of Exio Attorneys and great immigration attorney, and look forward to more. And also down the road, we'll be doing another panel discussion somewhere between California and Florida and Texas, and you never know. We'll be getting together soon. So thanks a lot, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Wayne. It's been a pleasure.
I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive a notification when our latest episodes have been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we will see you soon.